the part that you want to know.
So, the first 3 that we did that I investigated about storybook interventions, the first intervention had parents and children with storybook time in school, and then English vocabulary reinforcement individually at home. The second intervention had stories read in Spanish with parents at home, and then those same stories read in English in school. And then the third intervention had storybook in school and then interactive vocabulary lessons. And the last one, surprisingly, was the most successful. I didn't think that would be the most successful. Do you think that that is something that we could do here at La Casita? Storybook in any way?
Yeah, I think that volunteers have a very romantic notion of their work sometimes, and so bringing openly advertising, hey, we need somebody to come in and read books to children twice a week. If Pants Okay is one, I think would be very attractive and doable. But getting somebody who can commit to coming in regularly is going to take a lot of time.
Okay. So then the other 3 that I looked at were about whether monolingual instruction or bilingual instruction would lead to better literacy levels. So the first intervention had English-only instruction versus Spanish transitioning to English in class. Can you stop it? So the English-only instruction versus English-only instruction versus Spanish transitioning into English as an entire class was the first one. The second intervention was English-only instruction versus a pull-away group where they took all of the Spanish speakers into their own special group and did Spanish transition into English. And then the third one was completely 100% bilingual all the time. Do you think that it is feasible that we could do 100% bilingual instruction in the child enrichment program?
I think that it's feasible to sometimes have English and sometimes have Spanish, but unless we have a formal program in which there's somebody who is creating curriculum, scheduling people to come in and do these things, and has a training program for facilitators, we're just going to take what we can get, which is sometimes going to be an English reader, sometimes going to be a Spanish reader.
Yeah. So then the other 2 factors I looked at were environmental factors. So basically, whether subsidized childcare would be, and I know that that is a dream that Karina and a lot of other people here have, to have a daycare here in the center. And then the differences in literacy between implicit and explicit classroom teaching models. And so for the subsidized center-based care, basically it was looking at whether receiving government subsidies for childcare, so a Head Start program, for example, led to better literacy, and they actually found that they don't, but community-based child care systems do have better literacy in Spanish speakers specifically. And so we are kind of positioned well as in La Casita because we're already a part of the community, so we could have different like community partners, community people coming in and leading activities, or how could you see that working?
I think that sounds amazing, but there needs to be a coordinator for it.
Yeah.
To be honest. So if there's somebody who can specifically just manage partnerships, that would be beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And then the other one was implicit versus explicit classrooms. So an implicit classroom, they did studies, basically they brought implicit classroom practices into normally explicit classrooms and tried to see whether literacy and test grades went up or down or whatever. So implicit classrooms are classrooms where the children get to create their own rules, and they, as a group, they create, these are the rules we're going to live by in our classroom. Punishment is never punishment. It's seen as areas of growth. And as in contrast to an explicit classroom where when the first day that you come in, you're told these are the rules, you need to follow them, if you don't follow them, this is the punishment. So punishment is going to be timeout, it's going to be a red sticker, whatever it is. So explicit classrooms have more expulsions, they have more disciplinary actions, they have more behavioral outbursts than do implicit classrooms. So they took the implicit classroom research and applied it into an explicit classroom. So usually implicit classrooms are white middle class classrooms in public suburban schools, and the explicit classrooms tend to be lower income, low class, people of color classrooms in urban areas. And so they took this and put it over here, and their test scores went up as well with implicit. So what do you think? Do you think that that would work the same? Do you think that that would be an effective way to run a program here?
I think that another angle that is really important to the question is the fact that we are kind of like a buy-in program. It's not like we are requiring any kind of attendance thus far. And so if, like, the implicit model would really fit really easily here, because we would just be like, okay, like here. But then again, if you have people that are just dropping in for like one single time, you have to explain those rules every single, or not the rules, but you have to explain the classroom agreements every single time to every new child. Mm-hmm. So I don't know,
positives
is my answer.
Negatives.
Yeah, there's positives and negatives.
So if you could, how do you think that we can grow La Escuelita and the child enrichment program, or other services here at La Escuelita?
I think that there needs to be a person whose designated role is child enrichment, because right now we've got a lot of people who all kind of understand and know what's going on and step in when they're able to handle it, but everybody else has other things that they have to devote their time to. And if we had a director of child enrichment or something like that who is trained in these things and able to, like I said, develop curriculum or find curriculum that's already out there, train facilitators, schedule facilitators, that would be amazing. But it's,
how can we make that a reality, basically?
I guess we would need to find grant funding for a child enrichment program. I don't know what the requirements are for doing that, if we have to meet certain regulations in order to have a child enrichment program / daycare.
So the daycare gets a little bit tricky because we have to have increased insurance. Because a daycare implies that parents leave their children here. Mm-hmm. So right now, how we have it with La Escuelita and the enrichment program, you're not leaving your kids here because you technically stay on the premises. But if we ran a daycare, we would have to increase our insurance.
And we would need staff for that too, because, yes. I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh, sometimes we have volunteers that are sort of able to help. But yeah, there's also, I think there needs to be some communication with parents as well about like what expectations are for their children when they're here, because sometimes it's like, oh no, they're fine over in the corner because there's an adult. But if that adult has to leave and cannot make an announcement to the entire room or something like that, there just needs to be some kind of like understanding about rules, about times, about location.
And so, is there anything else that you would like to see at La Casita that you think would help better serve individuals that come here?
I think it's really nice that the crickets sound is on the noise machine, because every time I pause for thought, I'm incredibly aware of it. And the crickets that are going to be playing in your recording later. I'm going to pause it so I can think. In regards to how to make the child enrichment experience better here for individuals, better communication about roles and expectations between parents, between their children, and between staff and volunteers, because it's very difficult for me to train volunteers to do child enrichment, especially for preschoolers that I know nothing about, and not quite knowing what is expected of me either. and not knowing how to schedule volunteers.
Thank you.